ES Audio.
From the Evening Standard in London, I'm John Weeks, and this is The Leader. You get off the tube, make your way into the city, you hear a bike pass you, and... Oi! Your phone is stolen. This is the kind of crime being reported to police every 6 minutes in the capital, according to stats provided to the BBC by police. The figures show more than 90,000 phones were stolen across the city last year. That's the equivalent of almost 250 a day. And adding to the misery, figures from police also show the recovery rate was 1.9%. Policing Minister Chris Philp told Nick Ferrari on LBC Radio that he was deeply concerned by those figures as a Londoner, and said he plans to lift the burden of form filling and bureaucracy off policing so officers have more time to follow up on crimes like phone thefts.
Well, I think there's more we can do, to be absolutely honest, Nick, and that one of the reasons why I was keen to sort out these problems with the bureaucracy and the form filling and to lift that burden off policing is to free up time to spend on follow-up. And so once we've done this, one of the challenges I'll be putting to policing is to say that with all the extra police officers, with the removal of these bureaucratic burdens, which are worth nearly 500,000 hours a year, I expect, and the public expects, obviously more visible policing, which is preventative and it reassures the public, and I expect more to be done on follow-up.
But is this enough to tackle the issue? Joining me now is the Evening Standard's crime reporter John Dunne. So John, first of all, can you just talk us through these latest figures from the police regarding phone thefts in the capital?
Yeah, the figures about phone thefts are really quite shocking. Mobile phones reported stolen in London every 6 minutes. That's equal to 250 a day stolen across the capital last year. I mean, it's absolutely appalling and very worrying for people. You know, obviously everyone's got a phone and, you know, you're walking down the street and there's thugs on cycles. People are sort of grabbing people from behind, grabbing their phones, running off. I mean, it's it's not a victimless crime. This is a robbery and can leave people really shocked and in some cases physically injured. In Westminster alone, 25,899 mobile phones were stolen in 2022. So this is not a good look for London when you consider Westminster as a sort of tourist hub. These are extremely worrying figures across the piece.
And as you mentioned there, you know, there is CCTV footage of people on bikes swiping people's phones. And I understand coming out of the tube is also one of the sort of hotspots for phone thefts too. Is that right? And could that be one of the unique risks impacting Londoners?
You're quite right. Coming off the tube, people, you know, whether you're at work or tourists, you haven't been able to use your phone in most cases on the tube. First thing you do is perhaps check your messages. You come out of the station, you know, you're not thinking that someone's going to jump you from behind or that you're in danger. But in fact, these thieves, they circle round stations and then bus stops, and they're looking out for you when you're least aware and when you're concentrated looking down at your phone. There are rich pickings outside transport hubs, and Londoners and tourists really need to know that, and they have to be careful. We shouldn't live in a world where you have to be so aware all the time. But unfortunately, these thieves know what they're doing and they've got their targets and they're doing it effectively. So London has to fight back and, you know, the Met have to get a grip of this.
Talking about the fight back, I understand the policing minister, Chris Philp, has been talking about these figures and dealing with these sorts of crimes. Can you tell us what he has proposed as a solution?
I mean, as well as putting more officers on the street, they want to cut down on red tape, cut down on bureaucracy. I mean, as I mentioned before, this is a crime that affects people really badly. It's not a victim's crime. It's not one of those minor things. This can impact people badly. And in the past, I think there's a sense, and the policing minister, Philp, suggested that these things aren't being written up and police aren't taking it seriously enough. And there's just too much bureaucracy. They have to file a report and it takes too long and the reward isn't seen great enough. So I think now bureaucracy is going to be cut back as well as more officers put on the streets, and writing up reports on this and targeting these criminals is going to become a priority.
Let's take a break now. In part 2, John explains what we can do to avoid having our phone stolen in the capital.
I think the police have always said, just be vigilant and remember what you've got in your hand. I mean, it's equivalent in many cases to £1,000 plus in equipment. So would you walk around holding out, £1,000 in notes when you walked out of a tube station or when you're walking down the road?
So John, I understand for a while now there has been frustration among police officers when it comes to paperwork and, as you mentioned, bureaucracy and red tape. Do we know how much of their time is spent on admin?
Well, I mean, there's thousands of hours are lost in admin, and, this red tape is really taking police officers off the streets. These lengthy reports they have to write. Fill in, ticking the boxes on these things. I mean, there's thousands of hours every week being lost across London. And the minister wants to stop this, wants to get more police out there on the streets to address this problem. In fact, today, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is out in Westminster visiting crime hotspots. He's actually in the Edgware area where, crimes like mobile phone thefts and the like are rife. So they've launched an operation called Operation Nightingale, which involves locals reporting these incidents and the police putting more officers on patrol in those areas.
Well, it's good to be back in Westminster to see for myself the difference Operation Nightingale is making to this community. I've been here many times, and this community has been blighted by serious youth violence, antisocial behaviour, robbery. This approach from the police is Operation Nightingale working with the community, neighbourhood patrol teams, other specialist police teams like the Violent Crime Task Force, targeting those serious violent hotspots. We've got 75 of those across our city. What we've seen over the last year is violence reduced by 36% around the estate, crime down by 20%, showing the difference the police working with the community with real neighbourhood policing can make.
So it's obviously a big concern, and the government, the policing minister, wants to get those officers from behind their desks and on the streets.
And do you think that tactic is largely preventative, John, in terms of police being out on the streets, preventing criminals from stealing people's phones? It's a difficult crime to sort of deal with, isn't it? A phone being stolen, trying to recover it. Do you think preventative is the way forward?
I think that the feeling is, and the feeling always has been, that, the more officers on the street, the visibility of officers on the street will really, really help in this situation. Tracking down these phones is very labour intensive, although the police have been accused of not following up on reports. Many people have tracking devices on their phones and they're telling police where these phones are, where they've got to, sometimes abroad. But following that up is very costly and time consuming. And so I think the idea of, what the mayor's doing, so this Operation Nightingale, etc., more patrols on the streets, is seen as the best way forward. Visibility, officers outside transport hubs, and trying to sort of put these thugs on warning that they will be seen if they swoop on innocent victims.
And for people across London who are just doing their day-to-day business, getting around the city, is there any sort of official advice on how best to avoid that from happening? Perhaps waiting to use your phone not as soon as you get off the bus or the train?
I think the police have always said, just be vigilant and remember what you've got in your hand. I mean, it's equivalent in many cases to £1,000 plus in equipment. So would you walk around holding out, £1,000 in notes when you walked out of a tube station or when you're walking down the road? What's in your hand is very valuable. Be vigilant, protect it, and be aware of who's around you. Very, very important, especially in busy central London at transport hubs where people are brushing up against each other, etc. And your attention might be wandering. So just be careful and remember what you've got is a prized possession and treat it as such.
There's more news, interviews and analysis in the Evening Standard newspaper and, of course, at standard.co.uk. That's The Leader. Thanks for listening. We're back on Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock.